So in this program we're going to continue to use a for loop, but we have some different instructions this time. It says ask the user how many smiley faces to print and then print exactly that many smiley faces. So you know, the for loop that we did previously, I'll just use x as my loop counter. For x equals 1 to, before we saw something like 1 to 1,000, 1 to 500. This is a little different because we're being told to ask the user how many smiley faces to print and then print that many. So I don't want to hard code a value of say 1,000 or 500. We don't want to print 1,000 smiley faces. We don't want to print 500 smiley faces unless of course that's what the user wants. We have no way of predicting what the user is going to type in. So there's a way around this. Let's first ask the user how many smiley faces to print. Okay, and whatever the user types in, we're going to put that into a variable called num smileys. We can use text window.readNumber to capture that number from the console. Okay, so then instead of hard coding a value like 1,000 or 500 or whatever, we can say for x equals 1 to num smileys, right? If the user types in 10, as in he or she wants to see 10 smiley faces, this will read for x equals 1 to 10. Okay, if the user types in 25, this will be like x equals 1 to 25. So whatever the user types in, it's contained in this variable, and we can substitute the variable for a hard-coded number, and it'll work exactly as we want it to. Okay, don't forget your N4. Let's run it. Okay, how many smiley faces? Let's do 5 so we can see the result. Okay, that looks like 5 smiley faces all together. Let's do 5,000. And there are 5,000 smiley faces. So that's just yet another twist on the for loop, but the syntax is basically the same. We just had to maneuver a little bit to get the program to behave the way we wanted to. Okay, here's another program that we have. We are being told to print numbers 1 to 100, each separated by a space. Okay, so in this case, we're not printing smiley faces or hearts or anything like that. We're printing numbers 1 to 100. How are we going to make this work? Well, we know that the loop is going to run 100 times because we have 100 numbers that we're being asked to print. So let's say for num, or well, let's use counter. For counter equals 1 to 100. And then before I do anything else, I'm going to end that sandwich. Okay, so we do know we're printing something at the console, so alright, what are we going to put in here? Should I hard code a 1, for example? Well, that gives me the number 1 100 times. We were told to print the numbers 1 to 100. Okay, well, here's one thing that may not be apparent. Our loop counter, okay, the word counter, the variable counter, takes on a value each time through the loop. Each repetition through the loop, or each time the loop runs, that's often called an iteration of the loop or a repetition of the loop, but the first time the loop runs, counter has a value of 1. Okay, and then the next time the loop runs, counter has a value of 2, and then the next time counter has a value of 3. And when counter gets up to 100, that's how the program knows that it's time to quit and the loop is no longer executing. So counter, incidentally, is going to have the same values that we're being asked to print. First time through, counter is going to be 100, or I'm sorry, 1, and then the last time through, counter is going to be 100, and then counter will adopt every value in between 1 and 100 as the loop is running. So we can simply print the value of counter. Okay, and we're being told to separate these numbers by a space, so we'll throw a space in there as well. Remember, that's called concatenation. Okay, and there are our numbers 1 to 100 separated by a space. Okay, one more here. Now we're being told print only even numbers 2 to 100 separated by a space. All right, well, we know how to print the value of counter, so we'll say for counter equals 2 to 100. Okay, and we're going to print the number separated by a space, the value of counter, just like the last program that we looked at. Okay, well, okay, so we've got the numbers 2 to 100 separated by a space, but we were asked to print only even numbers 2 to 100. How are we going to manage this? Well, there's another keyword that we haven't looked at yet, and this is the step, the word step. And if I put step 2, that means that, counter starts at 2 and ends at 100, but it doesn't adopt every number in between. It will count by twos, basically. Okay, 2, 4, 6, 8, and so on. So that way we'll get only our even numbers. So we can use step 2 to, again, count by twos through the loop. Now this loop will only run 50 times. We'll only get about 50 iterations through the loop because we're stepping by 2. Okay. All right. And you can see the output is less than the last program because we're stepping through by 2. So anyway, we are going from 2 to 100 and only even numbers in between.